Hello, everybody. Welcome to Badgerpod Gamergate. This is episode number 19, the Crusade at E3. I am your host, Brian Martinez, and we're going to be talking about the latest happenings and the latest rising of fire and all of that, all the dank memes. So I'll just do quick introductions, then we'll just jump right into our topics because a lot of shit's going on, as always. I'm Brian Martinez, the host of the Gamergate show as well as the Nerdcast, and I am a comic book illustrator and big giant video game nerd that's been playing since the Atari 2600, so you know how old I am, more or less. And I will pass the microphone, the potato phone, over to Anna.
Woohoo! Potato phone! Thank you for having me, guys. I am one of the Honey Badger co-hosts, Anna Cherry, also known as the Naked Girl that does naked things. I'm also a diehard gamer, and I have not had a privilege or opportunity or whatever to go to E3. Not sure that I would necessarily. Same with PAX. But I have been to many other cons, and they're fun and awesome, and video games are fun and awesome. And I'm going to pass the GLaDOS potato on to Rachel.
Hello, I'm Rachel Edwards, and I do all sort of things and things and stuff and things. Most of you may know me as somebody who has been following Gamergate since the beginning, and I also blog at nuttingnerdist.tumblr.com, and I write a myriad of different things in the background, and I am the knight. And I will pass this glorious potato over to the wonderful Hannah Wallen.
Hello, I'm Hannah Wallen, curiouser of curiosities and a writer of things, and I guess that's pretty much it for me, so I will pass this on to Oliver.
Hey, Oliver Campbell, back again, talking Gamergate stuff. I'm a very vocal Gamergate proponent, and I also do a lot of writing just like everyone else here. My current two books on the market are Rabbit in the Road and The Twisted World, The Dust Harbinger. When I'm not doing that stuff, I'm doing a lot of video game playing and bicycling. So let's get on with it, Brian.
All right. Okay, so stuff's been going on. We'll just jump into the first big thing. This could be a big story, even though I just did a little write-up. So, real quick, Ubisoft snubs Kotaku. Apparently, devs might be seeing how much gamers and customers mean to them and their business. Jason Schreier of the website Kotaku tweeted recently that they have not been invited to participate in the Ubisoft conference at E3 this year. Hard to say at this time what the reason might be, but rumors are that it could be because of Kotaku's recent treatment of Ubisoft's game Watch Dogs, where they accuse the game of being racist and sexist and ableist and probably a whole bunch of other shit. Surprise, surprise. Or their general practices and treatment of gamers, their customer base. I personally would like to believe that Gamergate is doing so much damage that mainstream developers are actually becoming steeled and beginning to see that they don't really have to cater to journalists, or faux journalists in this case, who put up with their shoddy reporting anymore. And I'm going to open the floor up to whoever wants to jump in and say something about it.
I can jump in.
Okay.
I have a question about E3 in a way. I suppose that's kind of where it goes from there. Because I am one of those gamers and nerd people that really appreciates gaming in terms of like tabletop gaming and card gaming and getting together with people to do all sorts of fun gaming things. But Comic-Con and E3, in my at least outside perspective, has looked like something more catered towards developers themselves and more of like a business thing than for people to come and like I don't know. I guess I don't want to sound like a feminist or anything like that at all, but it feels like there's an underrepresentation of quote-unquote indie games, and what I mean by that is most E3s, from what it seems like on the outside, is they have like Destiny, which is like overhyped, really crappy game, and then they have like this other really big game and big console, Xbox One, that nobody really cares and nobody's going to spend their time playing, and they focus and cater the entire convention to promoting consumer products, but not necessarily providing fun windows into the world of gaming. They're not doing like Skyrim artists and a bunch of like deep stuff about the games that people might be interested in, but it seems like it's more of a selling thing. So am I correct about that assumption, or am I completely off base on that?
Well, I think
I can answer that for you, Anna. E3 is basically a trade show. That's why, for a long time it's been closed to the public, and so not only are people connecting in the industry and obviously setting up business deals and things like that. They're also showcasing their new product. It's kind of a good way to get a feel for what your competition is doing and seeing where the market is going. They talk about a lot of things. There are additional meetings that go on. So what we see from the public eye, we just see mostly the new stuff that's coming out. But people are talking sales figures. It's a place for many people. For example, for the ESA, the Electronic Software Association, which is the video game industry's lobbying board, that's a way for them to connect and talk about issues as well. So it's really complex in that not only is it just about video games itself, it's also things that are tangentially connected to video games. So you'll see, Microsoft employees out there that don't necessarily work on the Xbox division. You might see folks that just work on things like DirectX. Or you'll see other.
Putting it as a trade show perspective, that really does help, because I have gone to Exoticas and other trade shows in the adult industry. So I definitely have a framework of like, oh, that's what it is. Okay, that makes perfect sense. So in that case, it is quite a huge move that E3 did, because if we're talking about, like, if I were referred to Exotica, for instance, where you have all the top companies that are in the porn and camming and like strippers, every kind of anything related to the adult industry, sex toys, all of the major representatives of the industries would be invited and have booths and things like that at trade shows in the sex world. So if that is exact, basically replica of the gaming world, then what we see here is a removal from a group of peers. They basically got demoted majorly by this move of E3's, and they were basically told that you do not represent video games. You are not who you think you are in this gaming world. People don't listen to you. We don't really care about your opinion. You're not representing your viewers' interests. You're not representing our interests as the gaming companies. So we do not consider you as a valid news source any longer, which to me is a massive statement. I think that's really cool.
As particularly with the pressers and having attended an event, I can tell you how this stuff works. Like with the big pressers, like the Ubisoft presser, with the Konami presser, the Microsoft ones, those events, although happening at the same time as E3, are actually not connected to E3, which is really interesting. They're not even a part of the same building. It takes place in a different part of the building, and they're very exclusive to key people and press, and they're on an invite-only basis. And so Ubisoft, is sitting there saying, we don't want you here. We didn't even bother to invite you. It doesn't matter. Like, I think it's a huge statement because Kotaku still has a pretty big audience, and they still have a pretty big reach. And what Ubisoft is saying, for me, they're going, you're just not worth the trouble. I mean, to use a metaphor here, they basically just told Kotaku that they're a high maintenance girlfriend or / boyfriend, and they're just like, fuck it.
Yeah, they don't want to
away.
That really does say a lot. But to be honest, I'm not going to be really satisfied until they've also said, no, well, we also aren't going to invite you Polygon, because you're a piece of shit. and you're full of shit, and you do things like take points off and crap because it doesn't match up with your morals. It's ridiculous.
And when we look at that, it is a huge statement. It's a tremendous statement. You've got a big company that, even not connected to Gamergate or any of that stuff, just looking at it, you've got a big company that says, we don't want you here. One of the biggest, and I'm making air quotes right now, but I'm saying influential gaming-related outlets, and they did that. And other companies, obviously, we will be talking about that and say, well, maybe we should follow by that example, or maybe they'll just say, well, we're going to keep doing it anyway because it's worth it, and we haven't had a bad relationship with them yet. But, we don't know. We're all just speculating on that. But nevertheless, it's a very bold statement.
Yeah, I honestly think that this is something that we're going to see more and more of, because there have been rumors that float around that the higher up developers are actually more pro Gamergate than we want to think, and they just can't come out publicly.
Yes, I can confirm that myself. I've done a few interviews with a couple very high-profile developers, and when I say high-profile, I mean like coming out of big studios and working on some pretty major projects. Bro Team has had me, verify the identities and the employment of some of the developers that they've interviewed over on their channel, and I can tell you exactly where they work, and it is major studios. So the kinds that people, when you talk about video games in the Western world, you're talking about these folks, yeah. And they basically share our sentiment, but what makes it complicated for them, it's something I actually talked about back in December, and just in that general time frame. I said, many developers actually do take your side, but they are just as scared for what everyone else would be scared about. They think this thing, they look at this like, yeah, we're sick of the same stuff, we're sick of the same behaviors, but then they're also looking at what we'll say social justice outrage type, and I'm making a slash with that, do. They go after people's jobs, they try to kill their careers, for having a minor political difference maybe, and they don't stop. You have to remember that these are developers, many of them have been in this industry for decades. They've got families, they've got kids, they've got bills to pay. Like, yes, they're getting to work in for what many of them is a dream job, but at the end of the day, they still have the same responsibilities as everyone else, and that's the stuff that they worry about. And as we know, many people will put aside political beliefs or other, things that they care about for something that they believe to be a bigger thing. And so with many developers that I've spoken to, their thing is they're trying to keep their heads low and they just don't want to get caught in the blast. But, they'll say things behind the scenes, and they'll talk about the stuff and they discuss it. And it's a business decision that you have to make. I mean, we've seen a lot of shakeups regarding dealing with ideologues and stuff just within the past, I'd say, 10 years. And how businesses come out and take stances and what the end result of that stuff is. And so it's a major business decision. If you sit down and you take a side on something like this, it's so complex. It's so complex. Like, there's one developer I know, and I can't name him outright, but he's someone who's been around. He's very pro Gamergate, but again, he's keeping a low brow. And we've talked back and forth about some of the things that the company that he's with has been through with the media. And I'm like, as we're having this conversation, I'm going, yeah, of course. Why your company has this particular stance? I'm like, oh yeah, you've talked about some of the hit pieces that. Or I remember some of the hit pieces that have been run on your company, and now I know why they take the stance that they do. But, they're sitting around on, companies are always juggling releases, right? And they're trying to hit key business points in the year, maximize sales, make sure that they can keep operating a business, because that's what they do. They're a business. That's what's up. No matter what, even if it's just for entertainment, this is how people make money, and this is how people make a livelihood. And that's the stuff that is the concern that is right there up front on the table, staring them in the face. And they have to weigh the consequences against, will this, destroy our business? If we come out and speak out about this, are we going to have to let people go because we end up getting ransacked by crazy ideologues? We see how far they're willing to go. They made a now world-renowned scientist who achieved one of mankind's greatest feats of being able to take a remote-controlled object and land it on a moving rock going, thousands of miles an hour? And they made that man cry in front of the world. So what do you think a game developer is going to do? They're like, man, I don't want no part of that shit. Like, if I can avoid dealing with these people, I will. But I think there's going to come a point where they're not going to be able to dance around it as much as they want to. And it's about who comes out, who speaks first. You know, it's the person who sits down and takes the charge and says, you know what, I don't give a shit. This is how I feel. I'm not bound down to this stuff, you know, like the Brad Wardells. You've got the Dennis Dyax, who are, you know, come out and they say, yep, we talk about this kind of stuff all the time. But people have to pay attention to that. The most important thing, I think, isn't the people who are speaking out loud. It's the people who agree with them and they're not speaking. We see that in everything in the world. There are people all over who quietly agree with things, but they're trying to keep a low brow because they don't think that they can take it or deal with it, or they're just afraid. And I'd like to think that we're fighting on behalf of those who can't speak up as loudly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hannah?
There's another aspect to this. I mean, what we're basically talking about here is at an event, whether or not any individual organization, any individual publication has a right to receive press credentials, and that's actually, I mean, that's not unique to gamers. That's not unique to games journalism. This is something that this occurs in all areas of journalism and blogging and everything. Like, imagine the honey badgers have been writing about upcoming elections. Let's say it's 2016 and there's a presidential campaign. We can write anything we want. We can say anything we want, but nothing that we have to say entitles us to press credentials for, say, a candidate speaking event or a debate or things like that, because we've got an opinionated outlook. We're biased. We have a men's rights perspective. You know, this is who we are, and so we would not be considered a news outlet. We would be considered an opinion outlet, and we would probably not, even if we requested them, get press credentials. And I mean, I've had press credentials for a speech before. I've had press credentials to stand like 10 feet away from President Bush when he was president and running for re-election. And this was back when I worked for a regular newspaper, and I was also affiliated with a politician who was going to be there, and it was, you know, I was able to actually get cleared to get in. But as a honey badger, it would be unreasonable for me to expect that. And it's the same thing in this situation. When you have a specific bias and you are not simply covering the information, but putting your own spin on it and using your work as an attempt to persuade people to adopt a viewpoint, even if you're doing so by providing factual information, like we don't publish anything on the Honey Badger Brigade blog that we don't know to be true, that we don't research and look at. You know, and anything that we call opinion, we make it pretty clear that it's opinion. But we still wouldn't be qualified for something like that. And for these games blogs that come out with opinionated statements on gender in games and gender politics in games, where they want to insert politics into games and insert politics into people's ability to decide which games to buy and what they want to do, what they want to play, and what they want to enjoy. That isn't journalism. That is editorialism. In a large event like this, you know, the administrators of this event have every right to base who they offer press credentials to on who is going to give them the most complete and honest coverage, not on people who are going to claim their opinions are fact and try to disguise the fact that they're not backed by anything, and certainly not by certainly not on anybody that's going to actually slander them.
So this, I wanted to throw something else out there just so that we get it to be a little bit clear, because this could be a little bit vague to some, but I think that it's important. I was telling my friend about this story, and you know, I saw when the Schreier had put a tweet out saying, you know, that they were not invited to the show, and then people had commented. I think one of them was Mark Kern, and he said, you know, I hope that they do the same thing to Polygon. And we were just, you know, sort of saying that in here as well. And of course, the reasons for that is because we don't think that they're real journalists, and they don't represent what gamers want, and they've also attacked us, libeled us as a group and so on. And I was telling a friend of mine about it, and he's the kind of person that really likes to argue, and he likes to play devil's advocate. And he said, wait, so you're happy that Ubisoft snubbed Kotaku from one of their events? Is that not the same as when the Honey Badgers were kicked out of the Calgary Expo because they were being silenced for having an opinion? And Kotaku has an opinion that's also being silenced. So I want to put it out there. I have an opinion on it too, and some thought, as to why. But I want to put it out there, and I see Hannah's got her name in there. So please, Hannah, expand on that. You guys do know what I'm talking about, though, right? There's this idea.
I understand what your friend was saying here, but Kotaku hasn't been silenced. First of all, they can continue to publish as they want to, and considering that they're not talking about Kotaku having had a voice in this location, they're simply going to have the same voice before and after. They're just not going into the event. Now, if Kotaku had been the thing that they claimed to be, had they actually been a journalistic outlet and were getting treated as an outlet with no journalistic integrity and then kicked to the curb because of that, there might be some similarity. The Honey Badgers were treated as if when we went in there we had no nerd affiliation at all. In part because the brainiacs at the Mary Sue don't understand sarcasm. But in any case, we're looking at two different things here. The treatment of a group as an invalid member, or a smaller group as an invalid member of the larger group that they've been a part of all their lives, simply because another subgroup in that group disagrees with them politically, versus the treatment of a blog as not a journalistic outlet, as not news media, because their whole past indicates that they are not news media, they are an opinion blog.
To look at this, to follow up on that question that you had from your boy Brian, they're not even remotely the same. Like they're, to quote Pulp Fiction, to go back to one of our previous pods, he's like, it's not even the same ballpark, it's not even the same field, it's not even the same fucking sport. Like, we're talking about something completely different here. So let's do a quick side by side here. Okay, so you show up to Calgary Expo, which is one, an actual public event. Two, there are a certain amount of fees that were paid to show up. Three, Honey Badgers they paid their fee, they did their application. There was nothing in secret. There was nothing stealth. It was right there that you were going to be there. And then, four, you've got people that intentionally, as the event was happening, show up and start acting up. All right? And then that's how that whole situation went down. Now let's look at what's happening with Kotaku and the Ubisoft presser. First and foremost, they are, even though we're going to sit here and say, man, this is a blog, these are opinion pieces, but just for sake of the context of the discussion that we're having and press passes, media passes, what have you. Okay, so Kotaku is a journalist outlet. It is a media outlet that is trying to cover an event, a trade show. But here's the thing. First off, Kotaku is still allowed to go to that trade show. Like, they never said that they're not going to E3. No, they're not invited to the Ubisoft presser. Second, those are private events. Like, I've not been into any of those proper pressers, even when I was a journalist, because they come and seek you out. They say, I would like you to come to this thing. Would you like to come? This isn't like with Calgary Expo, where you said, you pay your fees, you put in your application, all that other stuff. No. It's like you've got to make a connection that isn't even that public in the first place. That's why we sometimes hear about different little events that go down there. Sometimes they even have after parties, all that, hosted by these same companies, all that. So this is an invite-only basis. So this isn't a question of being silenced. All it means is that Kotaku is going to see it happen the same time the rest of us are on a video feed, and if they want to report, they can still report. They just don't get into the cool kids club and get to sit in a much cushier chair than other people and see it happen live. That's what happens. See, people use the word, oh, silencing and taking away someone's right to speak. No, there's a difference, like, between censoring someone and taking away someone else's right to speak. At no point has their ability to speak on anything that Ubisoft is going to be showing at that show or their presser. That's not going to be compromised. They're just saying, you don't get to, you're not on the list to come into the Cool Kids Club today. That's it. And they got snubbed. That's the company's right to do that. If they don't want to invite you, they don't have to invite you. They're going to invite those who they think will be effective, and whatever standards Ubisoft uses based on those invites in the background. I don't know what they are, but whatever reason, Kotaku is no longer fulfilling that criteria to them, and they don't want them there. And that's their right. Now, I'll bet you this, though. They're not going to the Ubisoft one, but we don't know if Kotaku isn't going to say the Kotaku going to the Microsoft pressers or any of the other pressers. That's just it. We just know they don't get to go to this one, and that's basically what it comes down to. And no one's talking about, or no one's taking away their ability to even talk about that. If they want to go, yeah, we don't like Ubisoft. They're punks, they're busters, because they didn't let us go. Hey, they can do that. That's their right. But I don't think it'll be well received if they do. So that's what's up.
But Oliver, they're silencing these people. I read about it on Kotaku. No, but in all seriousness, yeah. In all seriousness, though, I mean, it's like saying that you're silencing someone because you didn't invite them to your party. Basically, you're like, this is invite only. This is something where you get to choose who gets to be there. It's not the same thing as silencing somebody. It really isn't. And with Calgary Expo, we had a product to sell, and because they disagreed with our politics, they decided to give a bullshit reason for shoving us out the door. And that's really the big difference here, is that you have people who have a choice. I mean, we filed the application, money exchanged hands, things like that, whereas Ubisoft has a choice who gets to be there, who they get to give the little perks to, and it is like Oliver said, it is their right to do so. I mean, if, like I said, I would personally prefer if slowly but surely this continued to happen with Polygon as well as Kotaku.
We're going to Kotaku Bell. That's what's
up.
Bring me a chimichanga.
The crunchy blog, Kotaku.
Okay, so I wanted to. Oh, I'm sorry, Rachel. Were you finished?
I'm just gonna say that I really would like them to hear their whining about it. It's like, oh, they didn't let us into the cool stuff anymore, and I'm so sad. Sad panda.
Yeah.
They're just bullies. They're just.
I was giving this some thought when I spoke to my friend about it, and there is one really important point that Hannah made before the show that I want to throw out there, and that is that if these press events are only for the press and journalists, then Kotaku shouldn't go, because they themselves on their website outright admitted that they were not journalists, which is something that they have used themselves to avoid or to dodge criticism of their clearly biased reporting in the past.
And it's associated with Gawker.
Yeah,
so
you can't have your cake and eat it too. So if you say on your website, well, we're not journalists, we're really like bloggers, or this is like all editorials or all opinion pieces, and that's sort of like, we're not journalists, that's not what we do, then you don't get the perks of being journalists while saying you're not journalists. So that means you don't get to go, because that, like, I couldn't do that. I couldn't go to E3 and just expect Ubisoft to let me in because I have a blog on my comic book web page and occasionally talk about games I like. That I'd have to be the press. I'd have to be journalists. So that's, just if we're going to look at technicalities, there's a really good reason right there why they can't go, aside from all this stuff that we've already talked about. But when I think about it if we look at it just from the principle of what free speech is, and like whether or not it's right or wrong, that being beside the point, I'm reminded of, in a way, if I was Ubisoft, I would probably let them go ahead and come in. And the reason why is because I'm reminded of a story of this gay man in the 80s. He wrote a book, and they were, at the time, there was a lot of discussions around, gay rights, or at least how to treat, gays in the public, and all of this this discussion about them getting married and like being able to work jobs and things like that. And in the 80s, it was very difficult to be a gay man specifically. But he wrote this book about it, and then basically he was presenting his point of view and all of his arguments for it and all that, and it started a series of discussions. And there were a lot of anti-gay people that have come out and spoke, and they range from being really really rational arguments to the really irrational, almost bordering on what many would consider to be hate speech today. And this man, who's I'm sorry, I apologize for not remembering his name. He was asked by people, why are you letting these hateful people come forward and talk about, gays like this, or like to argue against you? What they're saying is hurtful. What they're saying is, it's hate speech, etc., and so on. We should silence them. That would be, because we don't want to deal with this kind of language. And this guy, he said, well, we can't, if we do that, then we don't allow the discussion to take place. If the discussion doesn't take place, then we can't have the discussion. He says if you let both sides, even if I disagree with these people, have their say, then the argument wins. And that's the only way I would say that I wouldn't have a problem with Kotaku going to the event. But having said that, if I was Ubisoft, I would be a lot more vocal about my criticisms of the way that they write their stuff, rather than how a lot of developers do it, where they remain relatively silent and they let the reviews go and they let the op-eds go, where people are talking about the size of the cleavage in Dragon's Crown, or the lack of characters of color in this game, or how these characters are represented in this other one. I'd be more vocal and I would come forward more often if I was those developers. And I think that would be the ultimate victory for Gamergate, when these developers see the kinds of things that Gamergaters, if for lack of a better term, would come forward and say, and then they themselves become steeled to also make their opinions known more frequently, which we have started to see. But
I think it goes beyond that, Brian, because I would say, for instance, they're not limiting anyone's opinion by not inviting Kotaku, in the sense that Kotaku still gets to write their opinion online, and they're not being told, you can't write about us. But what they are being told, as Oliver brought up, is that you're not allowed into the cool kids club of, here we all have this trust and assumption about each other and a certain business relationship with each other, and if you're not going to play by our rules, well, we don't really need you on the inside. You can stay on the outside and talk about it all you want. Nobody's silencing them in the slightest. But I think what is a bigger issue as well is the kinds of arguments that are being used. Like, I am all for letting the argument win. However, what we're talking about here is emotional warfare, because that's what feminism is. It's emotional warfare. So you can't really, first of all, you can't have the designers go and criticize and be more vocal about what Kotaku and people like them are criticizing, because they're playing into this feminist idea of the horrible person if you ever say anything against it. So they can't even criticize it on that front. In fact, because this is feminism and the social philosophy that we're dealing with that employs guilt and shame and judgment and feeling and ad hominems of others as a way of protecting itself, because we're dealing with that specifically, the only choice is to remove people who pander to that and who live in that. Is you have to remove them from your sphere of influence, because you can't really debate their arguments, because their arguments aren't arguments. Their arguments are a sledgehammer of emotion hitting people over the head that they should be this X way. And at a certain point, you have to say, no, you have to be punished for your shitty behavior. Now, nobody is taking away their right to speak, that would be an egregious punishment, and I would never be for that. But politely being told that, hey, you know what, you're not a big boy enough to sit at the big boy table. I think that is appropriate punishment for somebody who's been throwing feces at them this whole time without any kind of repercussions at all whatsoever, and they can't have repercussions because they're pandering to feminism, which we are in a process of fighting, and you can't really argue it against it at this point. So I would say that I wouldn't use that idea of letting the argument win specifically for feminist theory and how that everything's colored through feminist theory through these publications, because you can't argue against that with logic.
Yeah, I gotta say that point about trust is spot on, and just from the experiences that A Voice for Men had with media following the 2014 conference, and this was really bad. Shoot, it was GQ. GQ, like months and months after all of the other media had done their hit pieces, and there were a lot of hit pieces. The writer that had been there for GQ, he held his, until very recently, came out with this article, and he did something that journalists have the power to do simply because people do not fact check. They assume that when a journalist says something, or somebody who publicly has journalist credentials says something, that it's true. He made a quote in the story, and this wasn't just for an individual person. He made a quote individually for each of the people that he wrote about individually. That there's no record of any of these quotes, and there's not a record to contradict the quotes, but none of them are accurate. And so he basically wrote bald-faced lies about the behavior and statements of the people at the conference. And those bald-faced lies have been used online to oppose those people's activism. The most recent one being I Stand With Dan, the hashtag that I'd promoted before. A lot of feminists came along quoting from that GQ article and accusing Dan of criminal behavior that there's no evidence he actually ever committed, and there is no proof that he ever said that, and he says he didn't. So this is a situation where once an outlet that writes about your topic, whatever business you deal with or whatever activism you're involved in or whatever, once an outlet that writes about that breaks trust that way, whether it's via a lot of opinionated writing, making claims that opinion is fact, or citing things that are biased and using those to bolster your opinion that are actually defamatory or derogatory towards your business or towards your work. That's a very, very valid reason to not want them into a trusted position like that, where you don't have your ass covered in case they lie. And it's the same thing could be said about our experience at Calgary Expo. We would have been screwed if we had not had that recording. That recording that proved what was said is the only thing really that prevented us from being railroaded in the media. And as far as I'm concerned, you should be able to hold an event without having to record everything that you do and say to the media. But if you can't do that, the next best thing is determining who gets press passes by whether or not they are actually a trustworthy outlet. And yeah, HD Failure pointed out, it's Kotaku, not journalism. But the point is, if an outlet, whether they claim to be journalists, whether they claim to be bloggers, or whether they alternately claim to be either or, depending on what's convenient for them, if an outlet has made itself demonstrably dishonest, don't let them into a trusted environment. Don't let them into the inner circle, because they're just going to screw you. And yeah, the first rule, always be recording.
Hannah's really on point here, is that I guess the easiest way to sum it up is that they don't have to help Kotaku do their job. It's not required. They don't have to show up and make it easy for them. Part of journalism in and of itself is sometimes you're going to have to do some legwork. Sometimes you're going to have to get information from outside sources or sources that just don't want to speak to you. and you're going to have to do what you can with what you've got. But there's no obligation for a subject that is being reported upon to make that information easy for those who are doing the reporting. I mean, like, if we take a step back and just stop looking at it as, say, an outlet and a company, you can look at it like one individual reporter and one individual person. Like, take those things and apply that in your mind, and then sit there and look at it as the person who's being reported on says, you know, I don't want you coming to my house and reporting everything that I'm doing. Like, they don't have to invite him in. That's just what it comes down to. Now, we know what the reporter is going to do. Well, the reporter is going to go around and talk to people who you know or people who have some sort of relationship with you and try and build the story that way if the subject isn't necessarily forthcoming on something that would be an actual public concern. Now, I'm not saying, you know, run inside and spilling all their personal stuff, but that's really how you look at it, how you can look at it. And they're just saying, I'll talk to all these other reporters, but you know what? You've got a bad reputation for being really bad at this, and you keep dropping all of our company secrets. You keep spilling our stuff, so why would they reward that by saying, oh, yeah, look, you just screwed up all of our company plans, oh, and then we're also going to invite you to one of the more prestigious events as a sub-event of this big event. Right, no, they've had it. And that's it, and they have every right to do that. You know, it's even when I attended E3, I was in the same camp. Like, I didn't reach out to any of the PR people, and I went on short notice, so I didn't even have the ability to go to any of those big pressers in that sense. And I'm just like, huh, okay. So I went and found out when the same time everybody else was, you know. And I think that people take those media passes and things like that, and they take those pressers for granted. You really shouldn't. When the subject makes themselves available to you, and they say, I would like to talk to you about this, I want to work with you on this, there's this implied trust that comes from that, and it comes in both directions. And when there's a breach of that trust, and if they say, you know what, I'm not making myself available to you in this sense, that should be a statement on the quality of your work. You're messing up somehow. And doesn't it kind of come back to what we've all been talking about for the past 9 months? It does come back to the trust in you, not just from the subjects that you report on to the audience. The trust on you is getting to the point where it's being irreparably damaged, and they don't care. Like, the second that something like that would happen to me, if I was in an outlet and something similar happened, I would put on the brakes on this damn car and go, okay, something's going down. Public trust in us is at an all-time low. What are we doing wrong? We need to sit down and go look at this and think about how we can restore that trust. And these outlets aren't doing that. They don't give a damn about public trust. And considering that that's our lifeblood as journalists, that's our credibility. That's our currency that we trade back and forth with the general public. I give you reliable information, and you hand me trust back. And when someone says, man, I see this info coming down the line, is this legit? You know, those who are there show up and say, yep, I've seen the stuff that they've reported on for years. You can trust this source of information to be true, objectively correct. And that's how you build up an audience, by having those things. And what these outlets have done is sat down and said, no, we don't care about that. And then they're shocked when, because they don't listen, all of this has happened. If anything, if one were to pride themselves on being an intellectual and being smart and understanding how people work, I shouldn't have to be the one to sit down and explain these things to a so-called allegedly huge outlet that's prestigious. No, you should know that, and you should go, yeah, we need to back up this train because bad stuff's going down. Let's shut this down before it gets any bigger. No, they're not. And so what does that tell you about them?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm glad that we put that out there. I just needed to say that because I think that, you know, we need to, I mean, I wanted to challenge these notions. If we challenge these ideas, and we challenge our own ideas, then they're just going to make our ideas stronger at the end of the day. So that was my main reason for bringing that comparison up. Now, I have a hypothetical question that I'm going to throw out to you guys, and I'll go around and ask you what you think. This bold move on the part of Ubisoft to snub or otherwise just choose not to invite Kotaku, do you think that Gamergate may have influenced that decision? Not like directly, not like they went to Ubisoft and said, we don't think you should bring these people, but all of this talk and this controversy that's been building over all these months. Do you think that Ubisoft might have been influenced by that? Maybe they saw that they were kind of steeled by it. I do believe that, personally, but I wonder if you guys think that. I'll just really quick, because we got to move on to the next item, but I'm going to go around and ask you guys individually. So, Anna, do you think that Gamergate might have done that? Had an influence?
You know, I think what they probably did was gave Ubisoft the understanding that the gamers themselves would be behind it if it happened. That they have the right to make that decision, and that the gamers aren't going to abandon them for doing it. That we're all fed up with Kotaku, and we're all fed up with dishonesty in journalism. So I think they got the encouragement they needed to go ahead and exercise their own values.
Cherry, what do you think?
Well, that depends, I think, on Ubisoft's and if they've been in the hot water before and things like that, because I don't know. I can't make such a judgment and know if they were influenced by their own personal decisions and their own seeing how the world has been treating them and seeing how Kotaku and people like them have been treating them, and that's why they were encouraged, as you said, by Gamergate. But I don't know if it was that or them just being like, you know what, this is too toxic, and they're not writing accurately anyway. So why should we invite someone who's not a journalist? But I don't know if they had a personal stake in it or not. From what I remember, Ubisoft, I think, was in hot water with some feminists recently. So, and from what I understand, it might also be not an American-based company. So I believe that certain, as we've seen actually, a lot of companies that are Europe-based or even some of them that are Canada-based, not as much the latter, but they have been fairly free in standing their ground and not giving in and not caving in to social opinion. So it could be just that they're standing firm and being like, you know what, you have slandered us and we're not going to take it. But I don't think I'm qualified to make that.
Yeah, I mean, we're just speculating. We know that this isn't factual. We're just sort of like wondering. Rachel?
Hi. Well, one of the things that I think of when I see this is that what we're looking at here is oftentimes we have these developers and they might have had bad dealings in the past with certain companies or something where they were just really tired of all of the bullshit, and I think a lot of times they're almost waiting for these journalists, or well, journalists in quotation marks, to force their hand. You know what I'm saying? And I think everything just kind of formed, aligned correctly for this to take place. And like Cherry's saying, it is difficult to really know, but I would imagine that there's probably some stuff going on in the background that we're not privy to that also added to this. I think Gamergate is definitely a part of it, but it was probably more like the last straw kind of thing. I mean, I think usually when you have someone who has a history of bad behavior, they kind of leave a trail, and you follow it. And I would imagine that Kotaku has probably rubbed them the wrong way more than one time. And not to mention all of the shifty dealings with Gawker and with being part of Gawker Media as a whole. And the fact that they haven't been paying their interns and things like that. So there's a lot of unethical things going on at Gawker Media as a whole that they might not want to touch with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah. Okay. Oliver?
You know, I'm going to have to say it's possible, but, you know, my magic 8-ball is saying, you know, answer is unclear, you know, ask again later. It's tough just looking at that because, yeah, I mean, Gamergate, in and of itself is hyper complex. It's almost a year-old situation. It's still going on. I think that honestly, that if there's an influence from Gamergate affecting that decision, it's minimal in comparison to how much shit Kotaku has done to Ubisoft over time. Like, let's sit down, let's just run the quick numbers. Okay, so they've multiple times over leaked their product before it was ready and forced them to show their hand. With the case of especially Assassin's Creed Unity, they leaked that a year before the damn game came out. As a business, I would be furious. I would be beyond mad. It was way before they wanted to show anything, and it wouldn't surprise me if that ended up affecting some of the end quality of the product. I think they did it with a couple of the other titles like Assassin's Creed Rogue, and they just keep doing it over and over and over again. To top it off, we've seen them do a lot of brigading of and inciting the mob regarding, playable female characters or adding characters in multiplayer, again, behind those titles. And the way I look at this, Ubisoft is treating this like an abusive relationship, and they're just saying, I'm not doing this anymore. They packed up and went to go stay with their mom. Like, that's basically it.
Kotaku's been friend-zoned.
Right, they're like, I'm done with this, man. Like, they're not going to keep doing it over and over and over again, and they're making a hard stance on what they believe is the proper behavior out of journalists. They're also affected just as much as us regular people are affected by, reporting. So are companies. Big decisions get made over that kind of stuff. And I think that not only have they taken a stand and just finally going, you know what, I'm sick of this shit, but I think they're trying to make a point to other big companies too. Well, and maybe even then, maybe that's a sly, underhanded way of saying to them what they said to gamers. Well, gamers don't have to be your audience. Gamers are over. Well, they're going, yeah, well, Kotaku doesn't have to be your reporters. Kotaku's over. And that might be a big sign to other larger companies of, let's stop putting up with this crap.
Yeah. And don't forget, guys, for those of you who are listening and are not aware, Kotaku is a small part of a larger animal known as Gawker Media. So all the Gawker crap, IO9, Jezebel, that's all part of the same amoebus mess. So, I mean, if you don't like Kotaku, don't want to support them, just avoid all the Gawker sites, period, if that's what you want to do. And it all sucks. Thank you, Hannah. That was the most important part of that statement.
It's all tabloid trash.
So let's move on to the next story. Thanks, guys, for all your input. Very insightful stuff. We're gonna go ahead and do a little thing that it was more recent that Oliver was talking about before the show. It's about Anita Sarkeesian. And Oliver, can you talk a little bit about your recent findings?
Sure.
Okay.
Basically, if you missed this event last year, there was a web artist. Her name was Tamara Smith, and she goes by the handle of Cow Kitty. And regarding the Anita Sarkeesian's Tropes versus Women video series that she did, there was kind of a collage of characters, of female characters that were up there, used to kind of represent that series. Well, this artist, Tamara, ended up realizing that some of her art was being used in this. It was fan art of the character of Princess Daphne. And she made contact with Feminist Frequency and, basically gave her a cease and desist of stop using my artwork. And, of course, it turned into a back and forth regarding fair use. And basically Tamara's stance was, hey, I don't have a problem if you're a nonprofit and you're using that artwork specifically for that purpose, that would be fine, but you're claiming to be a nonprofit organization, and I want to see that. You need to show me proof of your nonprofit status. So this went back and forth until the point of Feminist Frequency eventually just went ahead and pulled the art. So during some just general research that I do, probably a week and a half to 2 weeks ago, I was looking up what are the legal obligations of 501c3 nonprofit organizations. And that's when I ended up stumbling into this information through the IRS. One of the responsibilities and legal obligations of a nonprofit corporation is that if a member of the public approaches and asks to see proof of your 501c3 status, they actually are legally obligated to provide that. And that information includes your application letter for exemption. So just even you applying to be a nonprofit is one of the things that you have to provide. You have to provide, I think it's up to the last 3 years worth of annual returns that are filed. And I'm just giving you just the basic info. There's a couple of more things that you're required to provide. If you make that request in person, it has to be provided immediately being up to same day, right? But you can also make that request in writing, and it turns out that email qualifies as a valid request for that. And that's exactly what happened in this situation. Failing to provide your annual return by itself, just that single article, when it is requested, is a $10,000 fine for a nonprofit organization. I believe failing to provide the application for exemption is a rolling fine of $20 every single day that it is not fulfilled. So we sat down, we did the basic calculations, and it's close to about $20,000 worth of fines that have been sitting there that pretty much no one realized was even taking place. And so I went ahead and took that information and presented it, and well, it got people's attention. And that's kind of where it's going. There's other stuff going on. I've been in discussions with Tamara about it and what's been going on, and it's really interesting because, you know, we're having to look into the legal and all that and see what's going on. And the final thing that I said to people is that, well, we do have a responsibility. A nonprofit or organization is a public benefit, and essentially what that means is that it serves the public. That is why a nonprofit organization is given tax-exempt status. This is why things like churches are given tax-exempt status. It's because you are providing a service to the rest of the populace. You are not a private corporation. You are not a private business in that sense. And so, for the most part, your books are really open and available to anyone and everyone. And that's pretty much what's been going on. And so I kind of ended it with there's report forms that people can do to send that information to the IRS if you are inclined to, and the situation that's been going on, it's been going on since last year. And that's basically it. The thing that makes it very complicated, and it's all very murky, is that they, you know, just within this year's time, they ended up saying, oh, you know, now we're officially a nonprofit organization. Yet when you go and look, and you can pull this information up on the IRS yourself, they filed as a nonprofit as far back as 2013. From July 2013 all the way up to December 2013. That was their business year that they were accounting for. And so it's murky. It's like, well, were you a nonprofit or were you not a nonprofit? And if you were not a nonprofit at that time, yet you were presenting yourself as one, you are opening yourself up to misrepresentation and fraud. From the research that I've done that's laid out there. So no matter what, it's kind of in a losing position there.
Wow. So where are we at with that now? Like, what's
Well, I've been in conversation with, as I said, with Tamara, and I do know that at least a few people have sent in actual complaints to the IRS. The important thing to remember is that people need to keep their expectations in check with this one. It's not like you're not going to see someone just suddenly go to jail over this. No, that's not how it works. It's a fine on this organization. I think the most realistic thing that you will see, the IRS is also very clear that with getting those reports, they're not going to tell people what actions that they take behind the scenes. They just say that up front. We're not going to tell you. They may or they may not take an action, and they do say that it does rely on people just going in and reporting those things. In fact, if you didn't know, you can actually get a reward for reporting this information to the IRS. It's even contained on the form itself. But what I realistically see happening is that if Feminist Frequency, and I'm throwing them a bone here, because this is about fulfilling their duty to the public. This has nothing to do with, oh, I'm going to get you, I'm not over here twirling a mustache. No, you claim to be this type of organization. You claim to be a nonprofit. You claim to be a 501c3, and you have obligations to the public that you need to fulfill. And I don't care what your ideology is. We all have to follow the same laws, and currently this organization isn't. Now, if Feminist Frequency doesn't want to run afoul of this particular problem, what they can do is make that documentation widely available. And according to the IRS, making something widely available, I'm using air quotes here, absolves you of the need to respond to every single request to, well, I want to see your proof of nonprofit status. So making what I told Brian before the show started, I said, if you go over to water.org, which is Matt Damon's, charity, and you jump into the About section, you can actually go and see all of their returns that they filed. You get to see all that information. It's laid out there, and that's just posting that stuff, say, on a website, making it widely available and not obscured or hidden anywhere where anyone, if they want to see it, they can go see it. That fulfills that requirement. So if Feminist Frequency doesn't want to run into this type of situation, instead of just putting up their annual report and obscuring information, they need to put up all that information because the public is entitled to it.
And there haven't... on my end, there haven't been any recent controversies or anything like that, but I have been keeping an eye on the development of certain individuals who have pledged to the Kickstarter and have not gotten their rewards and have not had expectations met based on what was written in the Kickstarter rules. And for mentioning that to Feminist Frequency Twitter, they've been blocked by it. And so, in fact, there were cases of people, I think one of them even made a YouTube video as an open letter to Anita, mentioning that the rewards have not been met, and I want my money back, and you blocked me, and I can't talk to you about this, so what do we do from here? And so, I mean, there's two situations now we have, that what I mentioned and what Oliver was mentioning. If you're going to be a moralizer and standing there over an entire, and make yourself famous by standing over an entire group of people and saying that they're doing something wrong and that they're immoral, you better have your shit together. All right, that's all I have to say. You better not be doing it. Do not throw stones if you're living in a glass San Francisco mansion. So that is going to come back and bite her. And generally, we've seen that time and time again with religious leaders, so to speak, and others, where they moralize and they preach holier-than-thou messages, and then they're themselves caught in something pretty much exactly what they were saying other people were doing. So massive case of projection. And in fact, if I were to wager a guess, as with any feminist organization nowadays, we see a massive case of projection, perhaps in Anita's immorality speeches and misogynist and all that stuff as well. So, yeah.
Rachel.
Yeah, well, here's an interesting thing. What year did Feminist Frequency start their Kickstarter? And when were they did they first start? The website, at least according to Wikipedia, started in 2009. They did not register themselves as a business with the state of California until 2013. And then they did not, which means they weren't legally even a business until 2013. And then they only got their nonprofit status in 2014 or 2015?
Correct.
So this is a whole bunch of crap. I mean, think about all of the money that was raised in the Kickstarter, which, wasn't then, we don't know what the fuck happened to it exactly, because since they were not a business when this took place, not a legal business entity, they did not really have to account for it, period. And also, up until the point where it was a nonprofit, all of the money that she was making when she was doing talks and things like that were, of course, going into the pot. Now, the problem with this is that you are using somebody else's work as promotional materials, meaning that this is a whole bunch of shit when it comes to copyright. Copyright is very specific. If you are not a legal business, if you're a legal business and you're using somebody else's art to promote yourself and then make money, you have broken the law. It's pretty clear. And of course, if you're not a nonprofit, you've massively fucked up. And think about how much money she made up to that point that was also going into the pot, being unaccounted for. It's kind of a big, huge mess, to be perfectly honest. It's shifty as fuck.
Exactly what Rachel said is that it's all very difficult and it's very tricky. And there was a reason that I laid this stuff out, and then I'm going to let Hannah speak just to add to the discussion points here. Some of the stuff that I've talked about over time is people taking actionable, or people doing research and finding things that are truly actionable. This is an actionable thing, to kind of use the term, as it actually comes to, all the research, all the digging, all the discussions, then turn and can be compressed into something that people can go and do. It produces a real result. For example, with when Gamergate sat down and they made contact with the FTC and said, we think these things are an issue, and the FTC turned around and said, yeah, you know what, you're right, here, we're making changes to these rules. That's one of the biggest things Gamergate has done. They changed the rules for the entire country based on making that contact and enough people expressing that concern. Sitting down and writing to advertisers, that was an actionable thing. It's saying, here's what's going on, and I don't want to see your company associated with this type of behavior, and I will cease to buy your products based on those things. People did something actionable. I see a lot of people sit down and they complain about these many people who are exerting undue influence on the industry. But it's one thing to sit around and complain nonstop. Well, isn't that what our opposition does? They complain about everything but take no action. They say, well, games need this and games need that. And we say, well, go make your own games. And they go, well, I shouldn't have to. No, you should have to. You make the things you want to see in the world. If you want people to be good, then maybe you need to be a good person, and that's the same thing here. And I would say, if I have had any kind of criticism of Gamergate as a whole, it's that thing. It's spend more time focused on things that you can go and produce a real result with, and you can take that and you can put it in your pocket and say, I got this thing done and I got it accomplished. And that's the stuff that I go looking for myself. I go, and, when I sit down and I do my research, I go and look for things that can give people a real thing to work on, instead of just going, whoa, look at this person over here, let us all point and laugh. Yes, that's really fun to point and laugh at idiocy. I mean, everyone does it. But there's more to it than just this, because with actions come real results for you. When you go, hey, I'm just one person, but I changed the world. You can take that, you can put that in your pocket, and that gives you drive. That gives you the ability to keep going on a little bit further. It's a real result that you can take and you can hold on to. And that's the stuff that I want to see, so people don't get burned out or get frustrated because nothing's happening. Sometimes you have to go create happenings. You got to make those things happen by doing a little bit of legwork and knowing and understanding how this stuff works and why. Now, that's not being criticism, like I'm not jumping down people's throat. I'm just saying so you understand what my thought process is when I go and read into stuff.
Banana.
Speaking of the FTC, the FTC also handles scams and ripoffs, and they also handle fraud in internet services, online shopping, or computers. And I would think that the act of promising something, when they're fundraising, that they have the capability and the time and the materials to produce, and they have not produced it yet, which is basically what Feminist Frequency has done. She hasn't done the things she said she was going to do, and she hasn't given people the prizes she said she was going to give them for donating to her. that would fall under one of those categories, either scams and ripoffs or online shopping. And under the scams and ripoffs category, that includes a category. If you go to FTC Complaint Assistant, all one word, .gov, and you go into the scams or the complaints, the consumer complaint menu, and you click on scams and ripoffs, it comes up with several little categories, and the last one is no match found, which means you can complain without choosing one of the other categories. And if the FTC considers what you're complaining about a fraudulent business action, they will pursue it. So if you have given money for a service or a product, or donated for a specific set of actions to be taken, and they don't get done, and you're not refunded, and so on, then you can make that complaint, because this is a United States business, and she's been a business. I mean, the minute that you start that Kickstarter and make those promises, it's the same thing as there are people. In fact, I happen to know one. Or used to know one. There are people that are in prison for selling things on eBay that didn't exist, and not refunding when the thing didn't get sent out because it didn't exist. And so if you can get put in jail for that, there ought to also be some sort of recourse for saying, if you pay me money, I'll create this thing, even if the thing wasn't going to be given to you.
Well, here's an interesting thing about this, and this is something that's always struck me as the thing that really made me wonder why no one had poked around in this before, because, well, from a graphic design perspective, because I did go to school for this, how much would you think it would cost, maximum, to do a full brand workup of, for the website, like as in terms of things like creating a website, of creating a logo, of doing a professional illustration? I would say, a fair amount would be something, maximum like $1,000, and that's a drop in the bucket compared to what she got. And it's something, it shows very much that there is this mindset there with cutting corners. And that's something that should be a red flag for anybody who is paying attention. It's something that bothered me, and you saw that again where they were using Let's Play footage that had been made by other people. They went into this with this mentality of, I'm going to cut corners, I'm going to do as little work as humanly possible. And you see that in everything that they do. It's, I'm going to do as little work as humanly possible and try and make several $1,000s. It's something you see, and you look at the cost breakdown. There's several things here where you see, oh, salary and wages. There's like 4 people who did this, and they're not doing it full-time. Not by any stretch of the imagination. Most of the other people in the background who are doing this have other work that they're doing. So there's no excuse for 44% of it to really be just wages. And things like programs and stuff that you buy, equipment and stuff like that. How much equipment did you buy when you didn't see much change from the beginning videos? It's complete bullshit. And 11% of it was taxes? 11? Jesus. It's so fucking ridiculous. I don't know.
All right.
Just move on. Move on.
No, it's cool. Thanks, Rachel. So,
just ranty.
We're getting to like the home stretch. So I'm just gonna go through a couple of like wee little stories that have been going around. Something that just happened that somebody made me aware of, and I wanted to talk a little bit about Leigh Alexander anyway, because she's like one of my favorite people. She apparently was supposed to, or was asked to appear at an event to do some speaking, and she tweeted asking how much money. It was for a group called Comedy Trial or something like that, and she asked how much money would they offer her to speak, and Comedy Trial said, for you we'd find a fee we're on a zero budget for these two shows, so they don't have much in the way of money. And Leigh Alexander says, well, here's a tip for you for free. Sexism equals expecting experts to do unpaid work. So, and then they apologize. So she basically got really upset about the fact that she wasn't going to get paid whatever it is that she wanted to speak at an event, and she kind of lost her shit. And also, as an aside, she's blocked me. I didn't realize it until today, and I feel so flattered that Leigh Alexander took the time to block me from Twitter, that is, because she started a conversation about games as art, something that we've done on the show already a while ago. We've already had that discussion because we knew, you know, when it comes to like this sort of like social justice perspective on producing content and how these people discuss, you know, this kind of thing, they're always doing it from this whole like, you know, we want to elevate games, we want to make them into art, we want to raise them up and make them into something more. We see that they have the potential to be this thing. So we had a show on this channel earlier where we talked about, well, wait a minute, you know, are games art? And if they are, what does that even mean? What kind of a topic is that? And we already had that discussion. And my conclusion is that, of course they are, but that doesn't necessarily elevate them. Art does not elevate something. It's just a way of looking at it. That's all it is. So, you know, Leigh Alexander just now started discussing it, and she's like, hey, let's talk about it, guys. And I'm like, oh, I can't wait. I want to share my opinion. And I go to her Twitter, and I'm blocked by her. Awesome. So, yeah, Senpai noticed me. That was two of the smaller stories I wanted to throw out there. Leigh Alexander, intellectual for the 21st century.
Megaphone Senpai noticed you.
Yeah, that's my favorite part. I love it. Oliver, did you want to add something?
What you just said there, man, is deep. I think you said something so deep that you didn't even realize it. Like,
What?
You went all the way to the edge of the universe and came back. You went to the Taco Bell, the Kotaku Bell at the edge of the universe, got us all chimichangas, came back, didn't even realize you went out there. You said art is a way of looking at something.
Yeah, that's all it is.
And when you really take that and boil it down, here's what we are seeing happen with social justice warriors and the perpetually offended and all of that stuff. When you say art is a way of looking at something, what they do is say the only way to look at this is the way that we want you to look at it. And everyone else is saying, well, you know, a cube is a three-dimensional object and it has multiple sides, and not every side is necessarily the same as the other side. We should take it and turn it over completely and see all the different perspectives and points of view on it. But these guys only want you to look at things from the top side. And that's just a really big statement, but you boil it down so small, and I was like, damn.
No, that's exactly right. This is the thing. I mean, obviously I'm an art student, but I've also studied art history, and I've taken a very large interest in watching it evolve and how it's changed. And yes, I would agree without a shadow of a doubt, in my opinion, that video games are art. That's just a given. That doesn't mean they can't also be entertainment. Films are also art and entertainment. So these things are not mutually exclusive. However, the thing that a lot of people, especially these social justice types, fail to realize is that what they think is that art only counts as art if it not only is somehow elevated, which art does not have to do, but also sends a very specific message or brings attention to something that they feel is important. And that's not really the way to go about it. That's actually, in many ways, that can work to be the antithesis of it in many ways, or at least it can actually reduce it. Because, well, let's put it this way. One of the most important pieces in the history of art was something called fountain, and essentially what it was is this guy named Marcel Duchamp. He took a urinal and pulled it out of a bathroom, wrote a name on it called R. Mutt, and put it in a gallery. And said that's art. He didn't make anything. He didn't sculpt anything. He knew how to paint. He could do it, but that's not what he did. His point when he put it there was to allow people who walked up and viewed this urinal from a perspective that they had not seen it before. An object that they normally would have just peed inside of and walked away from, he put it in a gallery space. And he forced people to look at it in a new way. However, he did not force people to look at it in any specific way. He allowed people to come up with their own interpretations and their own ways of seeing what they were looking at. See, and this is how I look at it. If art presented to you just causes you to think about it in whatever way you choose, then in your own ability to freely think about things, then it has succeeded in whatever it's doing. This does not mean that it's elevated or better than something else. Like if a little boy draws on a wall with a crayon, he's made art just as much as an incredible sculptor made, the discus thrower. That doesn't put them on the same level, because art is not, it doesn't give something value. It's just a descriptor. But at the same time, art that is being used to push a very specific message, and it's trying to say something very specific, while it is still art, it also goes by another name, and that's propaganda. And I'm not saying this with any degree of I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. This is really what it is. If you look at propaganda posters from like the wartime, they're beautiful paintings and they're art a lot of times, but they have a very specific purpose.
Well, that is something to take into account. The interesting thing that I would like to bring to this conversation about art is that the interesting thing about social justice art pieces, usually done by these people, these social justice-minded artists, especially feminist artists, is that instead of art being this thing where you just project things upon it, or you're able to come away with your own opinion, the opinion is already predetermined. The opinion you're supposed to have is already predetermined, and if you don't have it, you get dogpiled. If you don't have the predetermined opinion, the pre-approved opinion about this piece that the artist had in mind, you then get jumped upon. And that's kind of an interesting thing. And I think I described my idea of how I feel about art is that, in my mind, there has to be a degree of merit involved. There has to be a degree of work, a degree of effort placed into it. At least in terms of how you want to be thought-provoking, of how you want people to think, or you get what I'm saying? Even the fountain thing at its time by Marcel Duchamp was a big deal, but now that every motherfucker is doing it, is just sort of placing something. Right now we get to a place in art where somebody could leave their lunch on an empty pedestal by mistake, and people think it's an art piece. They have no idea. They can't tell the difference.
Yeah, they've done that. And then there's, real quick, there was the guy who recently took a bunch of people's Instagram photos and he put them on canvases and blew them up and put them in this gallery space. And everybody got pissed off, but I'm like, I understand where that upset, where that's coming from, and I do think that he did something kind of shitty, but at the same time, he just did what Duchamp did.
Well, the bizarre part.
Well, yeah, but now it's not new and thought-provoking anymore. It's just some people recycling ideas, using it over and over again, and not bringing anything new to the table. You're just doing a lot of times these artists, they aren't really great artists to begin with, and what they're doing is they're getting propped up by just the right people, and so they can just sell a blank canvas for $1 million or more, a couple $1 million, and that is considered to be okay. I actually made a joke with my boyfriend not too long ago where he was talking about how he had been in a bar toilet and there was a whole bunch of different things written on it about advertising gay sex and trans people in the area, and I said, what the funny thing is that you could probably take that door and place it into a gallery and sell it for more than you have cumulatively made on any art that you have created thus far. And if you had the right person pushing it, that would be considered art. Yeah,
I agree. But you know what? All that does is it basically, that makes the point I'm trying to make, is that, calling something art does not give it value. It's just a descriptor. It just sort of
doesn't make it. Yeah, it doesn't make it doesn't make it good art, and that's what I think is the, like, for example, I would place vaginal knitting woman and the lady who was pushing paint eggs out of her vagina up in a higher tier than Emma Sulkowicz, because all Emma Sulkowicz needed to do is place cameras and be there.
Oh my god!
You get what I'm saying here? It's
Speaking of performance art.
Well, yeah. Are we talking about performance art, or are we talking about the earlier thing about somebody being treated like, you know, a random person and not? I'm
talking about merit here.
Our topic in general, because like you guys did bring up the interesting part about Suicide Girls and the gallery thing. And that is actually, if you don't know a little more about that, I was kind of curious, because we were talking about controversies with Kickstarter earlier. The man is selling them for like $90,000 or something ridiculous like that. And one in particular is a Suicide Girl photo that Suicide Girls is like, well, fine, we're going to sell this for $90. And they went on to Reddit and all the stuff when we're talking about how terrible this guy is by taking, you know, their photo and selling it for so much, so they're going to sell it for charity or whatever. But the curious part is that whenever they started talking about this other guy's issues and how dishonest and money-grubbing he is on Reddit, Redditors picked up the thread that, hey, you know, Suicide Girls actually exploits all of their models as well, and they don't pay their models nearly as much as they should, and there's all these ridiculous no competition clauses, and it's actually quite a racket. And of course, the founder of Suicide Girls, whatever her name, Suicide, she didn't answer any of the questions that dealt with them exploiting models, but she answered all the questions that had to do with how terrible they were put upon, and then promptly left. Yet Reddit still continued talking on about the exploitation of models by Suicide Girls, which there is, and that's the reason why I'm not a Suicide Girl, for instance. It's not a cool situation. So they kind of got their foot in their own mouth. With that whole thing. But it's funny, I have a photo that I should share with you guys, going back to the art and what is not art. There's this graffiti on the wall that says, "Oh, look, darling, what a wonderful Banksy." And then a line below that says, "Oh, no, darling, that's just some vandal writing on the street." And just, I know I'm butchering, but just having that written out as a piece of art, that Banksy himself could have written that. You know, and there's just such a blurring of lines between what is actually art, what is not art, who is famous, who is not. And for so long, art has been overtaken by people who want to pay a tremendous amount of money for something that isn't even worth it a lot of times, only because the name is popular. So we basically have another aristocratic, even oligarchical situation where it's not even, that's not what artists are. I mean, starving artists? Anyone heard of that? Like, artists are not rich, necessarily pompous people. They're sitting there selling something that a dog walked on a canvas, and they're selling that for $100,000, or a screenshot of somebody else's Instagram for $90,000. I wouldn't consider that art, but then again, what are we defining as art?
Well, so, that's exactly right, Anna. That goes back to what I was saying. You know, just because you call it that doesn't mean it's worth $100,000. And by the way, the Suicide Girl selling that photo for $90, that's fucking awesome. And that's the best way to go. So when some guy is pretentious and he becomes like this, because essentially what we're looking at is a dude that he's gotten so popular that he can charge whatever he feels like, and people buy his shit because of the name. But they're undercutting him so much, and I think that's fucking great. That's justice. So yes, bravo, Suicide Girls, for doing that. And that was all I wanted to say. So, Hannah.
I had a question for Anna, because I hadn't seen the Suicide Girls discussion. In what way are they exploited?
Well, okay. So whenever you submit a set, it's like 60 photos or something like that. So not a big deal, and you get $200 for it, from what I understand. So fairly little for fairly little. So that's not a problem. However, the way it works is that once you submit to Suicide Girls, you're not allowed to be working for any other company for up to a year. So your name and your image and everything to do with you becomes tied with them. If you become with them, you can't do anything else. So that is already a huge limiter. On the other hand, well, as far as the sets themselves, models do not actually get paid until their set ends up being on the front page and a bunch of people vote on it. So if a lot of people don't vote on the set, the model doesn't actually get to see anything, and yet they're still taking submissions and subscription fees from the members, of course. So the $200 for a set, that is not guaranteed ever. Unless you have a huge group of people within the community who will vote for it and will make your set front page worthy. And if your set ends up on the front page through all that voting, you get paid. If it doesn't, tough titty.
So it sounds a lot like the type of scams that were run by the big music companies on the hair bands of the 80s. This is something that I didn't learn about until into the 90s. But I don't know if everybody remembers when the fashion went from blue jeans that were in good shape to blue jeans that were full of holes and like all raggedy and everything, and
The acid wash and all that.
Yeah, well, and specifically not just the acid wash look itself, but actually having holes in the knees of your blue jeans and having spots where it looks like it was rubbed through or worn through and stuff like that.
The distressed look.
The distressed look. And that distressed look fashion was an imitation of the way these hairband stars would dress. And it was years later that I can't remember which one of them came out and said it, but basically they were appalled that people imitated that because they didn't all dress that way because it was cool to them. They didn't dress that way because they liked it and they wanted to have ripped up clothes that had holes in them and everything. They dressed that way because under the contracts that they signed with these big record companies, they ended up paupers during the times that they were performing because they owed the record companies money under the contract, and if they didn't bring in enough money, they really didn't get paid. They got nothing. So a lot of these artists ended up, it was really a major scam run on them. A lot of these artists ended up really poor, and a few of them made it big, but most of them didn't. And they ran around in these fashions not because they didn't, they liked it, because they didn't have the money to buy new clothes. And it sounds to me like it's the same type of scam. It's very similar to the work-at-home scams that you see. Like if you look online and somebody's offering you, work at home, you just have to buy this startup kit. Don't buy the startup kit because you're never going to make any money. You see the same thing in the backs of magazines. And modeling agencies do it. I could name one, but I'm not going to because it's not the only one. It's just the only one I have personal experience with, where you pay to take a class where they teach you things that, as a portrait photographer, I knew were incorrect, and then they teach you things about makeup that I really ended up not able to use, and and so on, and then they just sort of throw you out on your ass, and you're wooed with the idea that you're going to be doing specific work, but the vast majority of the agency's students get nothing, and you get end up paying a couple $1,000s for classes that do you no good. And if you actually go to a genuinely reputable modeling agency, they will laugh at you when you say you took their classes. So it's very similar sounding to, it all sounds like very similar thing. There's no make it big quick scheme that works. There's no get rich quick scheme that works.
It goes from John Casablancas, as you mentioned, one of the agencies, that completely says, hey, pay us for this one class, and we'll make your model. See, you're like a 90% model, so you're almost there. Just pay us. And then of course, and then you go into things like Suicide Girls.
You're tall. You'll do runway. Right. Yeah. For the record, that's not the one I have experience with personally. I know somebody else that does. And I know several other people that do. I knew one success story out of multiple people that didn't succeed with them as well. But yeah, at art colleges, another one is massage therapy schools. You look around your area and see if your area is, in fact, universities in general will turn out crap degrees. Not that the degree doesn't certify you to do something, you haven't learned anything, but they're not giving you the employability that you're being told you're getting. So you always want to research a company, research an agency, research everything before you shell out $1 to build your ability to work.
Absolutely. And with Suicide Girls, it's slightly less than that in the sense that you don't actually have to pay them, but you are paying for your photographer, possibly, for your time, for studio time, for wardrobe and things like that. And research is absolutely, that's what I've learned as well. And from every corner.
And that stipulation that you can't work somewhere else is a really big deal.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's actually a really nice segue into bringing it back around to the topic of here we have people who, going from, Casablancas and places like that where you have to actually pay to get a chance at something than going to hair bands and people like Suicide Girls, where you actually have established models who do know what they're doing and established singers who are really good and people want to see them, but they're getting screwed over by the larger companies, and they have to fight really hard and are basically broke. All there are starving artists because people at the top are taking their cut that's way larger than what the artist should be getting. And then we go all the way to people like Leigh Alexander, who are an expert in something questionable and are demanding, same with Anita, who are demanding gigantic speaking fees just for people's privilege to look at their face and have them ramble something incoherently, or coherently, but it's still bullshit. So
poor entitled Leigh Alexander feels offended because she got treated like a regular human being. Everybody gets asked to work for free.
And even professionals get screwed over and asked to work for free. It's not her.
And it's not a gender thing.
Upset by that, really. It really isn't a gender thing. I mean, my boyfriend, most of the times he gets asked to do commissions of any kind, most of it is entirely unpaid. Like for friends and stuff, they say, hey, I need you to do this thing, and eventually he gets talked into it.
What absolutely is a gender thing, that women who are like Naomi Wolf and others, Gail Dines, who are feminist speakers, get treated preferentially. It is absolutely a sexist thing.
Well, that is.
That particularly is.
Being asked to work for free is not. Yeah, being asked to work for free is not a gender thing, though.
No, it isn't.
That happens to both sexes. It depends on what you do. Artists get crapped on like that all the time,
Absolutely.
And people with medical experience do too. You spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to college to learn to do something. You come out of there with a huge amount of debt, and it doesn't matter whether it's nursing or massage therapy or whether you're a physician. People expect you to give them your expertise and your capability for free because you have medical knowledge, and they feel like if they need it, you should give it to them.
Yeah. That's true. All right, so we got one final little bitty story that I thought was just kind of funny that I thought I would share. So it's time for Marvel to make Magneto black. Use the coming Secret Wars reboot to make the X-Men get real about race. This article is not from The Onion. This is from Salon.com. Apparently, Magneto, nemesis of the X-Men, is not unprivileged enough for them. From the 60s to the 80s, he was Magnus Maximoff, relatively straightforward supervillain who was at odds with the X-Men. Much later, his name and origin was changed to Eric Lencher, Jew and Holocaust survivor. Since the mainstream success of the films and that caused the comics industry to explode, people have compared Magneto loosely to Malcolm X, while Professor X was compared to Martin Luther King Jr., hence Salon's pitch. Apparently, according to Salon, Magneto has too much Jewish Holocaust survivor privilege. I find this really funny. It just killed me to see.
Yeah, I mean, oh my gosh, I mean, your parents get killed in a concentration camp and things like that. Oh man, he's just dripping with
it's
privilege.
obvious what's going on here. Salon never watched X-Men New Class. They just have no fucking idea how deep of a story and heartbreak they actually portrayed in that fucking movie. They're not fans, obviously.
The idea here is behind Magneto is that here is somebody who has been victimized by this kind of authoritarian leader who is just batshit fucking crazy. He's been victimized directly by the actions of Hitler, and then what happens? He ends up becoming somebody who is so full of disdain, so full of hate, that he ends up becoming like the thing that he despises.
They just wanted the Mel Brooks version. That's all.
Yeah, they just want the Mel Brooks version.
The black Jewish Holocaust survivor. That sounds like something Mel Brooks would put in a movie.
I really don't think that any of these fucking social justice warriors give two shits. And I've said this before. Give two shits about comics or games or any of this stuff. They don't give a shit, and I don't think that they've ever fucking picked up a comic. I don't think they've ever watched the cartoon series or the movies or anything. I don't think that they are invested in these stories because they'll say such complete and utter bullshit. stuff like this, or like, oh, and this is the bullshit where in shit like critical race theory and intersectionality, because in their minds there is this unchangeable hierarchy of oppression that isn't changing, that doesn't change over time or move around depending upon all the different variables. No, it's like, here is a spectrum, here's like a color spectrum, and if you are darker than khaki, you are by very nature more oppressed than somebody who might be of a lighter skin tone, who might have been, I don't know, outright tortured. Just, it's ridiculous.
For the record, we're all sitting on Oliver right now, oppressing him.
Yeah, I'm
oppressed.
God damn you all. You're pressing me so hard that we need starch. Basically, I looked at that, and I was like, the dumbest motherfuckers I've ever seen. Like, how could you sit down, try to preach to the choir, and show how ignorant you are on a subject? And it's a repeating theme that I've seen with the SJW types, is that they love coming in and telling everybody about what they doing, and they don't have a lick of experience or actual knowledge of the subjects at hand. I don't need a black Magneto. Why would I? There's a ton of other characters. Why would I need a black Magneto when I have Storm?
Unless
Unless
we're gonna change his name to Magnegro.
Yes.
Unless you're trying to say that black people are
it's
villains.
too late. It's too
Like, what
fucking late.
They're trying to make the villain more equal? What the fuck? I don't understand.
No, I need Magnegro now. Like, do it. Fucking do it. I swear to God, Brian, if you draw that, that's going to be one of my favorite pieces of art to come out this year, and I want him to have a big old afro, and I want him to have, like, bell bottoms. I want it to be, like, the Black Dynamite.
Around it.
You know, I'm almost, I gotta say, I'm almost behind this now, if only to see how the SJW's heads would explode watching a black man battle a cripple.
Right.
No, think about that for a moment in your mind. That would
My God.
Well, that's probably why they have
but-
to level the playing field when it comes to Special Olympics.
I need that, man. I need that in my life. That would be some of the funniest shit I will see in a long time. But back to the serious part of what I'm saying. Magnegro, yeah, man, that's tight. Okay, basically the biggest issue is that the people talking about this aren't even aware of the subject matter. Okay, it's long been viewed and put forth that Magneto and Professor X are an allegory for Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. Like, do they not even understand the relationship between these two men? They are friends. They have a great deal of affection for each other, but they are, well, politically opposed to each other. That's why they show them hanging out and playing chess and having conversations without choking each other to death. It's because they know they both believe in the same stuff. They're pointing out, hey, here's a problem here, but they are opposed to how to go about doing that. It's kind of like looking at the difference, to use D&D terminology. It's not that much different from someone who's lawful good versus someone who is chaotic good. They're both generally good to a point, but there's this huge difference of opinion of, well, how do we go about accomplishing this thing? The entire point of X-Men has always been an allegory of race and dealing with those who are different, those who may be some type of other, maybe, depending on where you're at.
On that point? Thank you so much. I actually have a pet theory, and something I really love about X-Men, and for the record, I'm on Magneto's side, for now, in the sense that what I see it as Aspies and autistic savants versus normies. I very much see that mutants, as seen by humanity, are these scary people who have all these weird mental powers, and they know things, and they can do things. It's so weird. Kill them all. And Magneto is like, okay, you know what? These normies, they don't get us. They're scared of us. They want to exterminate us. We know they do. they're proving it left and right. They're shutting us down. There's so much abuse and misunderstanding and oppression of fucking Asperger's people, and people who are different, who are not socially, nerds, basically. And I feel like it's always an allegory, not just for race, which I kind of feel like maybe that's why they're giving us Magneto, so we can actually see deeper beyond the fact that he's just a villain and they're bad people.
Well, Magneto is the thing that makes him a villain is he has this sense of absolutism to his mindset. He doesn't, like, for example, when they brought forth the idea of a mutant cure, there were some people who had.
Why would you need to cure something? That's not bad.
Hold on a moment. There are some people who have such involved mutations that it inhibits their day-to-day life, so they can't have things like intimate relationships with other people. And the idea is that there should be the choice open, whereas Magneto wants to take over the choice being there. He wants to...
If you're against giving people choice, and I would say Magneto is a villain because of that one scene with Rogue where he refused to do something himself that he made somebody else do, and he refused to ask for volunteers. He simply forced her into the fucking machine, and that's when he became a villain to me. In the movie.
No, that's the whole thing, but that's the sort of thing that Magneto does all the time. It's the idea that you are a drop in the bucket in comparison to what we're all trying to do collectively. It's like the ends. It's like, do the ends justify the means? In his mind, no matter what he does, it always justifies what he's trying to do. But he doesn't really give a shit about all of the people who have to die or become inconvenienced along the way. And whereas Professor X does, he is coming from a position of trying to bridge the divide between people,
very much that
and be diplomatic about this stuff when he can.
Right, but let me ask you a question. Would you feel the same way about the revolution in France or the revolution in America, that those poor, those people that we killed to get our freedom, they had to die, and it was just so sad? Because at a certain point, we have to talk about the fact that there has to be a stop to social warfare, and there has to be a way to prevent people from taking too much. And frequently, the only way to do that is revolution, and frequently people will die. So at a certain point, we do have to get real and talk about the fact that it might be...
But not every issue, it demands a blood sacrifice. Not every issue, and some issue, but that's what you're suggesting, is that is that there are some issues that people absolutely have to die for. But here's the thing, though. If you can limit the cumulative amount of suffering of people who will die as casualties who had nothing to do with this whole conflict, then I think that is a better decision overall.
Well, absolutely. I would absolutely agree with that. And it's only...
But you're agreeing with Magneto, though.
No, I'm not agreeing with absolutism at all. I'm just saying that there's a problem with the argument that... we should shy away from absolutely anything that could ever potentially.
It's not necessarily shying away. It is trying to deal with the situation in a diplomatic way first as an option before. But Magneto always goes the extreme option. He doesn't give a shit about...
I would never advocate using that as your first option, ever. That's why I'm saying at a certain point, eventually, when people end up just taking and taking and taking, and we end up having a
normal people, though. He doesn't see normal people as even people in his mind. So he's more like Hitler than than Malcolm X, really.
Well, here's the thing, because that was a really interesting back and forth between you two. I think what people tend to miss with Magneto as a character is that, and especially just between Professor X and Magneto, is about the shaping of their experiences and why these two characters are the way that they are. It says a lot about Professor X, where, if we sit down and you watch X-Men First Class and you find out that Magneto is the very reason that Professor X is paralyzed from the waist down. But he turned the other cheek because it wasn't... he saw no malice in what happened with that. And he's like, it's a thing. It happened. It's an accident. I know my friend didn't mean to do this to me. Someone that I care about didn't mean to do this to me, but it is a thing that happened. With Magneto, we know he's a Holocaust survivor. He has been shaped by that experience. and what happens to people who are declared others.
And how do you stop
that,
Hitler without killing people?
Magneto takes that position because he has been an other not just once, but twice in his life. He's seen the extreme, and he has stated this many times, that he knows or he's seen what that conclusion can be, and in his mind, he is doing everything possible to prevent reaching another point of, well, mutant extermination camps, which they're already kind of headed in that direction. As said, we've got the Sentinels and, all those programs. You had the Senator talking all that crazy stuff and all that. And Magneto's seen that once before in his life. That's why he takes the action that he's saying. And, of course, Professor X says these people aren't dangerous by a default. It's that it's a thing, it's happening to people, they're scared. Help them to control and learn what is happening to them and why, and if we foster this, we can create good things and we can create a better world with it. And that's why he makes the argument and stand that, yes, that's why he has the school. He says, hey, send your children to me. They start showing mutations, send them here, and we're going to help them have lives where they can manage having this unique ability and still exist and walk amongst regular people, and regular people can interact with them and we can all get along. And, kind of illustrated by that first movie with, just as you said, putting Rogue in that machine, Magneto, his intent is to not have that happen again to him in his life. But, as stated, he's taking everyone else's choice away by saying, well, if we make everyone a mutant, then, well, really no one's a mutant. Kind of using that type of situation. And when we look at characters like this, we have to look at these things presented with the data. People are shaped and sculpted by the experiences that they have. And I think one thing can be said for sure that Salon completely overlooked. We don't need to make Magneto black to change the story because it's the same fucking story. Like, let it alone. But if you were to do something like an alternate universe take, as they tend to do, a parallel universe, who would Magneto be if he was not a part of the Holocaust, if he was not in a concentration camp? I'm willing to bet that he would have a very different stance. He would have very different opinions, and he might not be as extreme as he currently is.
Go ahead, Anna. Cool.
Out of the two extremes, and as we've seen in the movies, there is a way that bad things are happening, and mutants were extremely threatened through Xavier not doing a goddamn thing. Yeah, having a school is great, and I'm all about that. Education, 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 all the way. However, at a certain point, you have to say, this is the line and no further. And that's Magneto not saying he had the right approach, but you need someone to say this is the line and no further, and Xavier was not doing that. And that's all I have to say about that.
Well, yeah, no, that's absolutely right, and I think that's what the films were trying to do. They were intentionally, Bryan Singer, I think he did a really great job of doing this, of presenting two characters. One clearly, I mean, we're just talking about Professor X and Magneto. One clearly the hero, one clearly the villain. However, the villain is not a villain that you hate. You actually understand his plight, and it actually makes the relationship between them extremely complicated, and where you are actually thinking, well, I can see where he's coming from, and maybe the methods aren't right, but I get why it exists, and I think that's the point. I think that it's supposed to be, controversial in terms of like which is the right way to go, and that's why the comparisons to Dr. King and Malcolm X often come up with these, because that is a similar, there's definitely parallels there, and the point is, I think, to create that discussion where it's like, well, if I was Magneto, would I do things this way, or do I go Professor X's route? And I think that's actually why those are so strong. Those characters are so great because of that approach. And I mean, I'm not even sure. I think Stan Lee, for creating that, I think that was really brilliant, and that's one of the reasons why X-Men, I love them. So, does Magneto need to be black? No, I don't. I think that the idea, this goes back to our discussion about art, and this is like the last thing I'll say about it. Art doesn't need to get people to talk about a topic. It does not need to directly reflect a political point of view. It just needs to make a general point. Usually, it can be above these politics so that people that belong to any groups that they feel are, oppressed or underrepresented or whatever it is the X-Men are going through in this specific instance, anyone can relate to. Because when Bryan Singer did it, he was talking about homosexuality. But when you look at X-Men, when you ask Stan Lee, he was thinking about outcasts in general, whether that means you were a nerd, or if you were just like antisocial, or if you just didn't ever feel like you fit in. That's why they were teenagers. You had this feeling that you didn't belong, or you were trying to find belonging, and all of the bullying and ostracization that comes from that. And I think that speaking to that broader context is way more powerful than trying to narrow it down into a box, into a slice of something, and I think that for me, that's why it's not necessary. Aside from the fact, and I'm saying this as a Hispanic guy myself, I don't need anybody to make something into something to please me. I will generally not look at things through that lens, and I'll just find something that I like. So, Hannah?
Well, I'm going to talk about this from sort of a parallel perspective, not so much a comic fan perspective, although there were comics that I liked a lot. This really isn't limited to art per se. In a way it is, but this runs along the lines of social justice activism that involves doing something that basically accomplishes nothing and treating it as if it is of some benefit to the people on whose behalf they claim they are doing it. It's very similar to, let's put a female picture on some currency, some nation's currency. They did it in the UK, and they're trying to get it started here in the US with little or no sympathy for their cause, or trying to dictate that the next movie of some series has female characters to replace male protagonists, like they did with Ghostbusters. In all of this, it's completely meaningless gestures, literally meaningless. If all of the Ghostbusters are girls, women are not any farther ahead than they were if none of the Ghostbusters were girls. If Magneto is black people are no further ahead in the world than if Magneto is not black. It's complete and utter slacktivism of the worst kind, because it's not even saying something on the internet that might over time change the minds of people that have opinions that are damaging. It doesn't accomplish anything. It's worthless. It has no value. And they're celebrating it and pushing it as if it is a gift to the people that they are insulting by putting this out there. It's not just it's gross. It's not just slightly insulting or stupid or worthless. It's actually a disgusting behavior. Look what great people we are for pandering to you. Even though it's of no benefit, you should appreciate us because we were thinking of you. Aren't we nice? It makes me want to vomit.
Well, it's worse than just slacktivism. It's a very one-dimensional and superficial understanding of race and gender as a whole. What it is it's like, well, it's simply we can change the race and gender of this character, and there's not going to be any major differences that are going to really affect the story overall. They don't think about these things at all. They don't think about what they're really saying, because what they're saying is that the only thing that matters about you is your color or what's between your legs. And they don't think of anything else, because what do they really do here when they do these gender flips and these race flips? Often there's nothing of there's nothing of merit here. They don't really bring anything new to the table. There's nothing provocative that they bring. The only thing that they really bring is a change of color and a change of gender, and that's about it. But they don't understand what those changes would really mean for a character. It really is disgusting.
And they equate that shit with suffrage movements and anti-slavery movements and things that actually did something, accomplished something for people, and involved suffering for the cause. And they're equating stuff like that with changing the color of ink on a page.
Yeah.
You know, to look at this, and I guess since I'm the local black dude, and I can give my own personal take on like the meaty stuff of this. You know, first off, whoever wrote that is so short-sighted and doesn't even know what the fuck they're talking about. First off, let's just look at this from a business perspective. Does it seem really smart to go with a character that is widely considered to be a villain and then say, let's make him black? Like, do they not realize how people might react to that? Now, I'm not saying I would react that way. I'm just saying people are known to react over that stuff.
No,
Like,
Salon.com will have an article out the week after talking about how wrong that is. Like,
right. They themselves would turn around and do that. So that's just freaking stupid. Like, no matter how you slice it, that's just a poor tactical decision. That's not to say that we can't have black villains, because, no, we see black villainous characters all the time. Hell, even I've written a couple. But I'm just saying, how would people respond to it? And that is one of the potential responses. When I look at this stuff, you know, I've been reading comics for, God, as long as I can remember, since I was 6, 7 years old. And, you know, I've repeated this several times over the course of Gamergate. Like, if people don't know, like, I have a couple of tattoos. And my tattoos, you know, actually come from video games and manga and things like that. On my neck, I have the, if you're familiar with the anime / manga or the films of Berserk, the main character, his name is Guts, and way later on in the story, he ends up having basically a brand on his neck, and it represents something. I also have that tattooed on my own neck because it stands for something. I like the character. The character is white, okay? Like, he represents something that I care about. On my left forearm, I have, you know, the classic Mega Man, as depicted in Marvel vs. Capcom. He's not black, you know, he's a little robot. I mean, let's be real here. Those characters matter to me. They matter to me because I don't need my fucking heroes to look like me. If all you care about is some superficial traits when we're all the same color in the dark, or if we're all blind, like, you've got a bigger issue. I don't need my heroes to look like me. I need my heroes to represent virtues. I need them to represent great character for me to aspire to, and things to aspire to be. I need my heroes to stand as a symbol of something to reach towards, to be a better man, just not just on the personal level, but in the world. You know, that's again, my personal stuff. That's deep in my chest and what's in my heart. I don't care if you're a dude. I don't care if you're a woman. I don't care if you represent and stand for principles that are good and just and noble. Those are the heroes that I am interested in, and I will take those things upon myself. I don't need people telling me that I need someone to take an established character and, just as you said, change the color on the page to suddenly make it a hero for me. No, if you want to see and have more black heroes, say, be celebrated, go make some fucking black heroes that are worth celebrating. Put the time in. Just as you said, okay, if it's just about changing the color of the skin, then it shouldn't be that hard, considering we make new characters all the time, and the really fascinating ones at that. It's not that difficult, people. And the biggest offenders of this thing, you know, the SJW types, these are the folks who sit down and talk and talk and talk and tell everybody else what they're doing. But when the time comes to pony the fuck up, they're never there. They don't buy, they don't support, they don't purchase. They spend more time complaining about what everyone else is doing rather than spending time going, you know what, over there, this is a damn good example. This is great. I really like this. I enjoy this content. It does the things that I was saying or I wanted to see addressed, and I'm going to support this thing. They never fucking do. So why should anyone waste their time over such ridiculousness if these people cannot do the classic saying of put your money where your mouth is. Practice what you preach. If you want to see this, then you need to be there, and you need to show up, and you need to participate. And what really gets my goat is that there are people creating those characters right now all the time. Even I did. In my own book, like one of my core protagonists for the first book of my trilogy is a mute black woman who's kind of chubby. And you know what happened? Everyone fell in love with her. They were like, this is an amazing character. Holy crap. And it had nothing to do with the fact that she was black. They loved the character because she's a fucking interesting character. I spent a lot of time going, why does she do these things? Who is she? What kind of person is she? How does she interact with her life? How does she interact with loved ones? She's dealing with a crisis. She has gone from being regular capable person and having a voice, and now she doesn't have one, and she's having to adjust to those things, and people are excited to see that story be told. They want to know how she's going to get through it. People ask me all the time, how's it going to end? Is she going to ever be able to speak again? And I have to leave them hanging. But I got them. I got their attention because I told them a story of something incredible, and they want to see how this person is going to get through that crisis. We need more people getting on people's cases for being bad writers rather than we do over representing stuff. I don't need my heroes to look like me, so stop trying to tell me what I need my fucking heroes to look like. I know what I need. And rather than tell me what I need, why don't you ask me, what are you looking for in a hero? And you're never going to hear me say, well, they're going to have to look like me, be black, have glasses, have Graves' disease, and have a busted pelvis.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. I feel exactly the same way. No one has ever made me look at things like color and gender more than the social justice types. It's so funny that I would literally just not even think about that shit more than they make me think about it, and it really annoys me because I don't want to. So thanks guys for all of your comments and everything. I gotta share some of these funny because I had to be the guy that said Magneto, and it's fucking the greatest thing ever. But ever since then, I've been looking at people have been throwing other names in there for other versions of Magneto as.
You should read out Hannah's. They're amazing.
I'm gonna read them all. Okay, so, all right. So I said, let's see. Oh, it started with this Mick Jagger casting. So if Mick Jagger was cast as Magneto, his name would be Jagnito. I think that's great. And then I said a female version would be Hagnito, and dial-up version would be Lagnito. A feminist version would be On the Ragnito. Rachel contributed a great one as for BDSM night. It's Gagnito. Hannah says for Teen Crisis, Pregnito. And then 30 years later, after she changes her name to Sagnito. And then lastly, a giggity version would be Quagnito. Sorry, Anna, I only muted you because there was an echo coming in.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. So I don't know what funny Magneto variants can you guys come up with? And thanks for coming and joining us on the show. If you're feeling frisky, you could check out our Patreon and all of our individual websites and all the stuff that we're doing. I'm not going to trouble you with that stuff, but we will see you soon, Manspreado.
We don't kill them.
All right. That is neato. All right, so yeah, I gotta go Magnebro. That's awesome. All right, guys, have a good night. Thanks for coming.